Right, and welcome back to Inclusive Design 24 2024, brought to you in partnership with our Platinum supporters, Barrier Break and Intopia, and our Gold supporters, Infoaxia and Tetralogical. You can follow us on Mastodon, and if you have any questions for the presenter, post them to the ID24 hashtag, if I can talk. Or you can use the YouTube chat somewhere on the border of this window. We'll gather your questions for our Q&A at the end of the session. Now, a reminder that ID24 is a respectful community, and you can find our code of conduct on the Inclusive Design 24 website. Now, I'm thrilled to be joined by my guest host, Juliet Alexandria. Juliet, over to you.
Patrick, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I am thrilled to present Donna Bungard, working for Indeed as their Senior Marketing Accessibility Program Manager. She's going to be talking to us today about the myth of the accessibility unicorn. Donna, we're excited to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Hi, all. Thank you so much. I know that it has been a lot of great content in the last however many 20-something hours, I think, at this point. And I'm really excited you're joining me. So many great talks for me to catch up on later. So today we're going to talk about the myth of the accessibility unicorn. So here we have Sam. Let me read this aloud. Sam is an unparalleled unicorn at disability inclusion and accessibility, who effortlessly navigates the professional realm with profound expertise spanning from coding intricacies to in-person requirements to high-level business objectives, rigorous accessibility testing, and accessibility conformance reports or legal compliance. Sam strategically transforms businesses at every level to ensure universal accessibility and inclusivity, often as a team of one. Yes, there's a reason why there's a unicorn on the screen. That's a lot. And frankly, even if Sam did exist, here we have a more tired-looking unicorn, they'd be living on coffee, not be a true expert in most of those areas, and they'd probably be at risk of burnout. Because how effective can you really be when you're content switching from coding to in-person to strategy to this to that? It could be really, really hard for somebody to do it, especially on their own. So instead of having that one person who a team relies on for accessibility, I wanted to really chat with you all, and I'm hoping at the end there is a conversation. But I really wanted to chat with you all about what it is to be an accessibility subject matter expert. So we're going to talk about some types of SMEs. Now I'm going to have a disclaimer in a minute, but sneak preview, I'm making some generalities and grouping things, and you'll see me do that a couple times throughout this presentation because I want this to be easy enough for us to really consume and take away with us. We're going to talk about upskilling and hiring. What are we looking for? Where are these areas and what do we need to rethink? We want to talk about leadership, talking to managers, and collaborating. So again, these general groups of types of subject matter experts. We've got a digital builder, which is going to incorporate both design and build. It is a group that can be either an individual on a very small team, a large team, or potentially a third-party resource. Same with your disability tester or your digital tester. You have your in real life person or your build environments, and you have your strategic leader. And here we have also beautiful colored horses, not unicorns, representing each. So how these types translate into roles can vary dramatically depending on the size of your organization, your organizational culture, how much you do internally versus have to have vendors working with you, whether you are the vendor. All of these wonderful things come into play. So I'm going to, instead of talking about titles or experiences or companies, I'm going to talk about skills. And you're going to hear me talk about skills over and over and over, because at the end of the day, what matters most is that a person has the skills to do the job or knows what skills they need to develop in order to get the job that they're passionate about. So let's take a minute and talk about the digital builder. So again, design and development, I threw in UX in here. It's all of these people who build the actual product. And regardless if, where their expertise is on the design and UX side, knowing how to create engaging layouts, wireframes, mockups, prototypes, creating user-centric experiences that are engaging. Or if you're on the development side where you are interpreting those designs, wireframes, and prototypes and writing clean, efficient, and scalable code that will speak well to assistive technologies and browsers all over the world, no pressure. You're going to be implementing responsive design and making sure that you're comfortable with the guidelines, the web content accessibility guidelines, and integrate that accessible front end to a back end that's going to feed it information that translates across the world. So I broke this down to some general skills. Every individual role is going to go much deeper, but this kind of specialized accessibility skills go in terms of user experience, user interface, wireframing and prototyping, user testing, and responsive design. Whereas your build is going to be your more technical JavaScript, API integrations, Git or version controls, some basic usability testing so you can test your own work as you go, some AI prompting, and of course, collaboration. And collaboration kind of goes across the board, but I see that developers need this. And you might notice I threw in AI prompt writing. There's a lot to be said for using AI to supplement. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of creating things, but I love having a checker sometimes, and I know other people do too. So then we have the digital tester. Again, there are whole organizations dedicated just to this. But let's take a look at just some of the general roles and responsibilities, and that's going to be comprehensive testing itself, including mobile devices, desktop devices, knowing what platforms somebody and browsers somebody, that combination, organization support, what compliance and standards management is. And I said those as separate because a company's internal standards might be higher than the minimum compliance. And truth be told, they should be. Compliance does not mean awesome. Compliance is ground floor entry, which I'm sure so many of you who are tuned into this already understand. And then collaboration and reporting, because there is a ton of communication that goes into testing. You need to understand what the expectations are versus what you're experiencing. Then communicate that back, hopefully with some potential solutions, whether or not it be code solutions versus experiential solutions. You're still able to give that feedback. Typically, and this is written communication in some sort of ticket management software. But essentially those skills, again, screen reader, mobile accessibility, automated tooling, script development, so you can test these things at scale, manual testing techniques, obviously the knowledge of the WCAG guidelines and whatever other compliance, legal or otherwise you need to follow. Those written communication skills, in addition to larger scales documenting and reporting. Obviously, continuous learning, because assistive tech is growing exponentially. I'm so excited. I know that Google just released some information about new things. I know Apple just made a release about awesome things. This content, these features keep growing and growing and growing. So we have an opportunity to keep learning them. And then problem solving. You want to poke holes at things. And then, frankly, you need to be an advocate, especially if you are a member of a smaller team, knowing how to advocate for the importance of a given feature, especially if it's something that's going to make the difference in the quality of the experience, but might not be a legal compliance issue. Pardon me while I drink out of my bright yellow cup. So then there's that real life person. I usually say real life instead of build environments because outside of our community, That's how people think of it. So the person needs to understand how different bodies and perception abilities and perception styles, I should say, move through a space. And that understands different physical and emotional things at the same time and how those combinations are going to impact somebody's experience. And then there's some implementation, of course, with, every city or town has their regulations. So with this, you need understanding of accessibility and regulatory compliance, incredible spatial awareness, and a fantastic imagination for what is this like outside of my own lived experience. You need to understand research to understand, okay, there's a problem. We need to figure this out, but also this is potentially a barrier that I haven't had experience with. Who can I talk to? Who can I learn from? What book can I read? Obviously, inclusive design and user experience evaluation. You'll need to collaborate, and this could be with teams, like marketing teams, if they're setting up an event. It could be with a build or a physical location. It could be with real estate individuals. It can be with technology individuals, as so much technology has built its way into our offices, whether it be conference rooms or lighting or things like that. So there's all of these pieces. And then there's the written communication, because you're going to need to report. And then again, problem solving and adaptability, because when you're talking in a physical space, sometimes you need to figure out, okay, so what does this mean? And then there's this strategic leader. Now, this person usually didn't start out there. Sometimes you do have a strategic leader who learns about accessibility after they become a leader, but a lot of the times this person is someone who started in one of the, or more of the other areas and decided to get curious about, how does this impact the larger scale? How does this impact my company? How does this impact my region? So with that, you have to really learn to think about that strategic analysis and where those integration points are. You have to understand impact assessments and reporting. And it's a ton of cross-functional collaboration, because you need to be able to translate the work that's happening in all these other areas up to business objectives. And this strategic leader, it does not necessarily always have to be someone laddered up. This might be an outside resource coming in and doing some evaluations with you or something along those lines. So there's a lot of skills that go into this one, of course, too. We're going to pare them down for the purpose of today's conversation. We have some disability inclusion expertise. You need to understand how people work with various social identities, intersectional identities, and so on. And you need to have strategic planning abilities, as well as some data analysis. You need to understand the compliance needs, as well as work cross-functionally. And I say written in, I put in quotes, verbalish communications. I'll talk a little bit more about communication later, but I'm just trying to acknowledge that not everything goes in a document or a ticket. So that's where verbalish comes in, only because, truth be told, I put about 30 different words in this slide and none of them seem to fit. There's too many ways to communicate. So of course, reporting, presenting, problem solving, change management skills, advocacy, and continuous learning here too, because as the teams you're representing change with technologies, with abilities, with knowledge, we need to change too. So next we get into the upskilling and hiring. Again, we're talking about skills. And the reason I'm going to keep pushing skills is not only because it helps us figure out where we want to be, where we're going, where we are, but it also helps bring equity into our workplaces. Because when we look at the skills, we don't worry about if people are accomplishing A, B, or C in a traditional way. And those traditional ways are what have excluded a lot of the disability community as well as other underrepresented groups throughout our history. If we're looking for the skills to get the work done, we are creating equity and giving people a pathway to grow, saying, okay, you don't have this skill now, but here are some of the ones we need to develop. And, support each other along that journey. So again, for the purpose of this conversation, we are distilling things down. So those soft skills, I really dislike that term. I love somebody called them leadership skills. I saw somebody else call them power skills. But for the sake of understandability, I'll call them soft skills for this. But I think leadership is great. Communication, collaboration, reporting had a substantial amount of weight there, about 20%. Problem solving and adaptability, technically it's 100%, but for this purpose, again, we're going to say that about 15% really need to focus on that. Technical skills development, that's about a quarter of these skills that we looked at just now. Accessibility and usability are 20%, and continuous learning and strategic impact and analysis are about 10. Why did I lump these together? Because it lumps even further or distills even further down to communication, reporting, and technical being our key areas. And that's where we need to start challenging how things have always been talked about, especially like in our job descriptions, when we're talking to talent, when we're trying to bring people in, while we're trying to upskill somebody. Because audio communication, again, I'm just verbalish communication, it doesn't mean speaking. There's so many different ways to communicate. If everybody signs, great. Please include me. I'll need an interpreter because I'm still learning, but I'm trying. If you are on video, it doesn't mean your actual camera has to always be on. I've been actually taking advantage of this a lot lately. I just needed to shut off my camera lately. So I've been doing that more. That's very unlike me, but I kind of needed it. So I did. And so on. This matters about making a connection with the people with whom you're working and the people who you're advocating for, and keeping that connection alive. And however you communicate through that, go you. It doesn't matter. I don't mean go you in the, I mean go you as in, yeah, okay, let's do it. But when you look at job descriptions, when you look at roles, if you look at these things, they're talking always about strong verbal communication. And I want to challenge, we don't need that. Reporting. Disability is a protected class, extremely protected, which means you're not going to get a lot of data out there in the wild. And if you rely on disclosure rates to prove your case, well, in the US, I know those ones off the top of my head, so I'll pop in with that. But this is a worldwide thing. In the US, 28.7% of the population identifies as having a disability, the adult population. Of that adult population, 4 to 7%, maybe some companies are pushing 8%, disclose. That means the majority of people in the workplace are not disclosing. So what do we have to do to get reporting? Well, we have to get creative. We have to ask people questions. We have to see if we can get the community engaged in supporting us, because we're not going to do it alone. But in the meantime, you can look at those larger groups out there, and you can look at what, in my world, BLS, CDC, all of that, are saying about these numbers and the statistics, and try to paint the picture from there. It's going to be hard, but there is a way forward. And yes, technical skills are huge, because this is where a lot of the measurable day-to-day remediation work is done. It is so vital. It is so important, because none of this other change is going to happen if we build inaccessible or keep inaccessible experiences. So those skills are hugely, hugely valuable. So those skills, where are some resources for those skills? We got IAAP, that's the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. We have DeQ, we have the US Access Board, we have W3C, we have Google, and we have Microsoft. There are trainings here that, or learnings, they're not all trainings. DeQ University is resource to read. But these have resources you could dive into and learn from. And there's organizations out there that are grassroots and small. I made a very small list here. I challenge everybody. I know there's some great people in this audience. Put in your favorite grassroots organizations, your books, your podcasts. I have a million books. If you ever hop on my Goodreads, you'll see I have 1,000 books that I love. Actually, about 370 something, but who's counting? But grassroots organizations like Billion Strong, Divas with Disabilities Project, and Alley Talks. Books like Autistic and Black, Mismatch, Unmasking, and Disability Pride. And podcasts like Human Potential at Works, Axe Chat, and Journeys. Again, small samples, huge pond. There's more. Please share them with each other. I want to go into the chat later and read them myself. And I talked a little bit about AI earlier. We can't forget it. It is growing. It is so much rooted in assistive technology. Now everyone gets voice-activated devices that I won't say that name behind me or the one on my phone, but we all benefit from those. The blurring of the lines between assistive tech and household tech is getting blurrier and blurrier in some areas, and assistive tech is taking off with AI in others. So we need to prioritize AI in terms of getting people with disabilities upskilled here, learning here, working with the language models here. Because without people in the room with technology, we get more bias. We have ethical AI teams all over the world, a million different companies, all working to try to make this more ethical. But when you have programs that learn from our history, and our history isn't full of sunshine and rainbows, well, we have some work to do. So we need to get people there. We need to understand what skills are needed there. Are they AI prompting? Are they language models? Are they specific computer languages, which I'm of course blanking on because here we are. Regardless of where they are or what they're doing, we need to embrace AI and embrace the skills and understand how that can elevate our work in accessibility and our work in disability inclusion right from the go while this technology is young. So there's no one type of rule or single pathway or any one type of accessibility subject matter experts. Each of the 4 types we talked about today could be broken down into 100 different roles or more. There's a lot. It's vast. It's huge. And just because you're doing one now doesn't mean you don't want to evolve to follow that curiosity. But to expect a unicorn to do everything all the time is kind of a daydream. But then we need to talk to managers. And if you're the SME, it is so hard to say no, because most of us, or we're in this because we're deeply, deeply passionate. Another drink, give me a second. Not talk for very long without a little bit of sip. So the idea is that, yes, are you going to be able to pitch in? It's crunch time, lean in for a while. Absolutely, we all want to do it, but there's no way you're going to catch it all. And this is an opportunity. This sounds kind of negative when you just read it, but it's an opportunity. Why? When I say we're not going to catch it all? Because you don't always need SMEs to catch everything. Upskill teams around you. When you do things, say why you're calling it out, how it should have been different, what you looked at and why it was important. What was the user experience going to be like? What human story behind it is there? Because before you know it, and I speak from experience, you will be multitasking on a call when you probably shouldn't have been, and somebody's going to catch something you missed. And you're going to be, oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness. I am so grateful they were listening to me. I am so grateful somebody else noticed. And the more you use that, I'm not going to catch it all, as an opportunity to upskill everyone around you that you're working with, the more you're baking this into the culture of your company, and it takes the pressure off. And you're not going to be expected to be that unicorn all the time. So ways to communicate this all is you demonstrate, talk about the touch points, talk about the dynamic nature of what you're doing, create internal networks, and elevate each other, whether it be internal networks of SMEs, which are hugely helpful, or internal networks of people who you're showing and training as you go. And frankly, you're going to learn a lot in the process too, because as much as our work is dynamic, so is everybody else's. And then always have with you kind of a list of third parties who can support you. Now, again, depending on your organization and your makeup, you may or may not need that, but if you have a third party in an area you're not as specialized in, it's going to balance you out. So it's a tool to keep in your back pocket. And the most important thing when we're talking to the managers, don't present this as a deficit. Not being able to do it all isn't a lack of skill or ability or value. You're great at what you do. You just need to be able to set reasonable expectations. So instead of saying, you know, I'm so sorry, I can't come in the, hey, I noticed that, I'm resource constrained. I have a solution. Let's talk out my solution. Let's talk out this plan to get this better. This is not a deficit to not know it all. It's okay. And what if you're the manager? What if you're the manager who logged on or is watching this on YouTube later because you want to better understand where your subject matter experts are and what they're managing and juggling? Thank you for being here. So ask them questions. Are they someone who is more curious about strategy, but is really kind of doing a lot of the day-to-day testing or whatnot? What skills, what pathways, what things do they need to develop? If I knew this incredible developer, she's fantastic, but her passion was poking holes and doing that testing. She loved doing the QA and testing things for accessibility because she wanted to see where the breakpoints were. And because she was a developer, she'd be able to give some really thoughtful feedback on how to fix them. But she did that by learning skills. She identified that, okay, I needed to learn, in her case, she needed to learn voiceover first. So I need to learn voiceover before she was learning JAWS. I need to learn this, I need to learn that, because she wanted to follow her passion. She built skills for that. And collaboration and beyond. So when all of these things work together, we end up creating a culture of inclusion. How? Because you have teams, or whether it be teams or individuals throughout your company or, whatnot, you have this group of people who can come together and talk about this larger issue and then go back and upskill the people around them and get other people in their areas perceiving the world through different ways of thinking that they may not have ever been exposed to before. Because the barriers we face in the workplace around SMEs is there's never the bad guy in the back twirling his mustache. It is that everyone is always busy. Adulting 2 out of 5 stars, perks are great, but sometimes the day-to-day is a lot. It's not. It's more than 2 stars, but follow me here. When you have these groups of people working together and teaching the community, their professional communities as they go, they uplift everybody. And it starts becoming second nature for others to notice these things too. And that's where the results happen. It will never be as powerful with one person as it will be when we bring everyone along with us. And for the record, ERGs, employee resource groups, also play a huge piece in this too. There would be another person there had I thought to add them. They're not necessarily going to be SMEs or subject matter experts on anything other than their own lived experiences, but the group of them together can provide incredible resources and insights. So keep that in mind as well. Because ideally, you're going to have a whole lot of these resources in-house, but sometimes that's not possible. This is where your professional network is going to become critical to your growth. Whether it be you make friends in this space, whether it be that you follow disability inclusion or accessibility experts on social medias, join Slack channels, and even if you just read along and don't necessarily engage all the time, that's fine. But follow, see what they're learning. What books do they like? What podcasts do they like? The only way this is going to work is if we keep learning from each other and keep broadening our pools to keep learning wider and wider. So with that, I have talked a lot. I am hoping that somebody has asked a question or shared a comment in the chats or with the hashtag. I don't know if Juliet or Patrick will be joining me, but I am dying to hear from all of you.
Yes, in answer to your question, we will be joining you. Yeah, no, that was a great talk. Again, like most other talks that I've managed to catch today, a lot of it resonates so much with a lot of the experiences, not just in my current position working in accessibility, but I even cast my mind back to my previous life, well, very previous life, as working inside a university, managing the web team, the central web team there, with all the kind of devolved web authors in all the different parts of the university. And I was, for the longest time, kind of that unicorn that was tasked with both enforcing corporate identity and kind of the standards, but also trying to get everybody else to understand that, no, you can't just, I don't know, push all your PDFs online and call it a day. And that was really the very early stages of understanding, you know, from my own perspective, how it was more important to start building an internal network and, you know, not just trying to do it yourself, because as you say, it's not sustainable. And also what happens if that particular person, they might do it out of the goodness of their heart, but then they leave, they go to another position, and all of a sudden, none of the processes were actually geared towards what they were doing. They were just doing it kind of silently without telling anybody. And, you know, it's great as long as they're there, but then once they kind of move on to another position, everything falls apart. Anyway, sorry, I'm monologuing and
I love the
remembering
monologue.
my past. Juliet, I know you've been gathering a few thoughts of your own and looking over if there are any comments, so I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Donna, I enjoyed your talk so much. I just want to second what Patrick said. A lot of this does really resonate with me as well. Just as a small bit of an aside, I work for a consulting company as opposed to an employee in an organization. So I have a slightly different experience and take on that. But even within our organization, we don't expect one person to do everything. Everybody has a specialization, things that they're better at. And, you know, we make sure that we assign work based on that so that people are able to get really good at what they're doing. So even if that's your entire purpose of your organization, specialization is important, and even more so when you're in a larger organization. So we had a question from Hannah. Hannah asks, how do we communicate to prospective employers or talent agencies what our expertises are, especially if they're not as familiar with accessibility?
Oh, Hannah, that's a fantastic question. All right. So I think it's going to have to be a lot of educating in terms and carefully expressing all of your skills that you do have and all of the talents you do have without necessarily presenting it as a deficit. So I'm going to completely make up a persona, not you, because I don't know your skill sets. But for example, if you're going into something and it's just, kind of a generic accessibility job description, you might suggest that, or this persona might suggest, I have specializations in testing progressive web apps and on-site with JAWS, with Apple and with Apple Android products, but I'm not as familiar with the Apple gestures or voiceover. So what we could do is create a iteration plan of testing first in the areas I have expertise. And then if you'd like, we can either look at third parties or look at upskilling programs to address that. Now, if it's something a little bit further apart than different types of testing, you can always present it as asking questions. Awesome. You want both testing and advocacy work. That's great. I'm really intrigued by the variety. What percentage of time do you expect to be each? And then if they didn't realize they were asking for both, it at least opens up the conversation, but present it as a question and not as a telling you. What do you think about this? How do you expect the balance to work between these various specializations? Kind of little keywords like that built into the questions can maybe help get that conversation going and kind of, put on that light bulb moment of, oh my gosh, wait a second, I'm asking for different specializations. And that might help build that communication. And truth be told, if it doesn't go great, then you need to decide if that's someplace you would be able to communicate the value of your day-to-day. Because if you can't communicate the value of your day-to-day once you're there, it would likely be, in my experience, a more stressful work environment. I hope
that makes great sense, Donna. Thank you. I have a follow-up on that one that's fairly related. So what if someone finds themselves in the role of an accessibility SME unicorn? And what are your suggested strategies for prioritizing their limited effort and attention? And as a follow-up, how much of that depends on the particular company culture?
Okay. In terms of strategies, and this is, truth be told, not only for accessibility unicorns, I've had similar conversations with people who are managers and programmers and who are this and that. Block time in terms of if you have a lot of creative or advocacy work to do, try to give yourself and align meetings associated with that and put working time, focus time on your calendar and, block that together. So maybe, yes, in the morning you need to do an hour and a half of something else, but then you have the rest of your day to focus on various types of work within that one single type of thinking. Or if you have testing to do, maybe you work with people and you ask them the deadlines and you arrange your meetings and you go, okay, Wednesday from 10 to 3, I'm going to tackle all of these different meetings and tasks related to that. And I'm not going to pretend that at least most schedules can say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are going to be, testing, design, advocacy, strategy, reporting. Most companies can't break it down that much, but that's where company culture comes in. Because if you happen to have a company culture where Fridays are low meetings, a lot of companies have that. If you have low meetings Fridays, maybe that's where you put in a lot of your either heavy concentration or your creative work. So that way you can just have more time to really just get yourself into that. You're not going to be able to always stop the content switching, but you can at least group the types of thinking, and it will reduce, and frankly, my past lives experience, it'll reduce the cognitive load a bit and make it easier to manage. And you're not switching as far between, because there's nothing worse than going to a meeting where you're talking about high-level strategy after doing some in the weeds work and realizing that you spoke in the weeds to somebody who is expecting you to be a strategic leader. Or vice versa, when somebody's asking you for some tactical advice of how to do something on a call and you're thinking at the 10,000-foot view, you're not serving them or you. So by grouping your calendar as carefully as you can, that's going to help. Now, company culture is huge. Do you have support to move things around whenever possible? Do you have flexibility to build hopefully some breaks in? I mean, honestly, I have a hard time taking breaks. I've been working on that. But like build some breaks in before, you change, for me, it might be changing product, but if you're changing full gears between coding and advocacy, for example, you're going to want to take a break and let your brain reset. So do you have a culture where you're comfortable doing that and enforcing that on your calendar, or just saying, hey, I'm going away for 20 minutes, I'll be back? I hope you do. I hope you have a healthy work environment, but I'm not going to pretend that everybody's comfortable enforcing that or living those boundaries. Overall, it's going to take some creativity. It's going to take calendar Tetris, and it's going to take some boundary setting. And I think that last one's hard. Personally, I've always found that very hard, but you can learn it. I know it sounds cliche to say, if I learned it, anyone can, but I assure you, if I learned it, anyone can. Just hold into that and know that it's not always going to be a black or white situation with those boundaries. Sometimes you're going to give, and sometimes you're going to want to give, but that's okay, as long as for the most part, you're giving yourself that grace. And then with all of that, once you break it out, take some of that strategic time you put aside and show somebody the big picture, that 360-foot view of I'm here, 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 and I'm tired. But you need to say that strategically, and you're not going to be able to make that argument until you build that space into your calendar.
Great, thank you. Let's see. So speaking to any of the managers or supervisors who might be tuning in for this, what are some practical steps the organization itself can take to avoid over-reliance on one individual for their accessibility efforts? I mean, besides throwing more money at it, which of course is almost impossible.
Yeah, I really am a huge, huge fan of basic disability training. And I'm not talking your standard etiquette, which is important, but I'm talking about disability as a whole, because we're human beings. We make associations. It's how we evolved. That's how bias evolved too. But we associate A with B, one with two, left with right, chicken and egg. So we make all these associations. And one of the problems that people have is that everyone has their personal experience with disability. If you've ever come to my talks, I was the only one who grew up in my family without a profound disability. I am neurospicy in some way. It was the 80s. Nobody knows. I'm cis female, so nobody knows exactly what kind of neurodivergent I am. Someday I'll get a label, but in the meantime, I'm something. I've had a limp for years, but it wasn't really disabled enough in my view to work with my family. And because of my family's eclectic composition in terms of different abilities and different limitations, I got exposed to a lot. But most people don't. They associate a specific disability with their grandmother, or the one boy who wouldn't sit down in 3rd grade. Or maybe they remember that one coworker who who they felt for, or maybe they just saw a TV show with awful representation and actually thought that's what real life was like because they had no other exposure. Again, no twirling mustaches, just a lack of exposure. So a general disability education throughout an organization normalizes it of this is normal. This is just another piece of that human existence. If we are fortunate enough to live long enough, we are probably going to acquire a disability if we haven't got one already. And people need to understand that. When you're talking to somebody about your design of a presentation like this, I always say, don't go below 12-point font. Some of us are in progressive lenses. Just because you can't see the bifocal doesn't mean they're not there. And we're doing like this with your 7-point font. We're trying to zoom in, but maybe the slides get smaller when you hit zoom. I won't call out a particular technology, but that does happen. So make your text bigger. And I joke with them, I'm like, look at most people by the time they get to a senior leader like role, it takes time. And 100% of people's eyes weaken as we age. It's a natural, again, a natural part of the human experience. The lenses of our eyes harden. So keep those things in mind. How are you going to communicate to the people you want if you're making your fonts so tiny that you can't read anything? So with that, it's just, I lost it. So anyway, I think there's just a lot of opportunity to create that educational baseline.
Have
to build
you had, sorry, have you had experiences with any specific providers or trainings that you feel really hit the mark?
As a global all-around thing, I ended up building one just because I felt that that was the best way forward. And I relied on focus groups with our ERG members and I talked to them. I was very fortunate to have the ability to do that. In terms of specialized things, there are groups out there that have been creating a lot of training. I think Disability In and Valuable 500 each have been doing things. Obviously, Making Space is very good at coming in and talking to companies at a large scale. At a smaller scale, not a smaller scale, but a specialized scale, you have like this Hidden Disabilities. Sunflower offers training on non-apparent disabilities. You have, I think, Business Disability Forum. I'm trying to go international with some of my organizations here, folks, so I'm trying my best. I believe they have some trainings available for companies or people. Actually, I know they do. So it's really a matter of just going out there and, again, getting engaged with the community and seeing what they're doing. And I also recommend trying to get into that global mindset. I've been fortunate enough to be working with Zero Project and talking to them a lot more over the year, and they've connected me with people all around the world that we can just sit around and have the conversation and ask questions like that too. And they're really a great resource too.
Great. For watchers, I have just dropped the link to the ADOS Zero Project case study that Donna has just mentioned. It's a YouTube video if you'd like to check it out. We are at the end of our session, I believe, Patrick. Do we have time for one more question, or is this it?
I think we're gonna call it here, I'm afraid.
Great.
Very interesting conversation, and I'm sure we could carry on for another session. So maybe Donna will do a double feature one time, me with my non-timekeeping skills and you with your interesting topic. I'm sure we'll manage to fill an entire day. Right. So for the audience at home, if you like this session, and why wouldn't you, give it a like here on YouTube, and don't forget you can subscribe to our channel to be kept in the loop on all our future events. Inclusive Design 24 is brought to you with thanks to our supporters: Barrier Break, Intopia, Infoaxia, Tetralogical, Intuit, Adrian Rosselli LLC, Assistive Labs, the Law Office of Laney Feingold, Skyscanner, and Vispero. Inclusive Design 24 will be back on the hour with our next session, so don't go anywhere. And thank you very much once again.